Good evening, everybody. Welcome. My name is Kyle Dyer, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be with everyone here tonight, here in this room, and also who are joining us online, to talk about recovery over time. So important. Thanks especially to Jess Monda, who is the administrator at the STEM Center for Strength. So I'd like Jess to come up and introduce herself and say hello to everybody. And I know she's just as grateful as I to see everybody here tonight. So thank you. I hope it's a great night for you all.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for those who are tuning in online. It's so good to see familiar faces in the audience. Thank you, guests, for being here. It means a great deal to our community, our team, everyone that has worked hard to get this event and panel together tonight. I would love to introduce my team. As you can see, we are live streaming. We are taking this event live, which is awesome because mass violence and trauma has impacted us all over, across the country, around the world. We were in a global pandemic these last 2 years. So this conversation is important for everyone. And so we're so thankful and so honored that you are here today. I would love for my team to come to the stage so we can honor them and just give them a hand for putting that time in to make this event work.
A small team.
Small but mighty team.
Yes,
we're
indeed.
missing one powerful mighty warrior. Okay. So we are the STEM Center for Strength staff. STEM Center for Strength is who put this event on this evening. We are a grant-funded resiliency center. So we are governed by All Health Network. They were given a grant following the school shooting that took place on May 7th, 2019 at STEM School Highlands Ranch. And that grant has been funding our Resiliency Center coming up on 3 years. Awesome. And so here we are. This is our small but mighty team. And so in year one, as we were preparing to open our doors, the pandemic hit. And so we had to quickly move our Resiliency Center to be a virtual Resiliency Center. And we had only a couple people employed at the time. And now we have grown ourselves to be three internal team, 4 and a clinician. This is Evan. He is our clinical team lead. Evan has been on the ground since day one following the shooting. And then we have, at the very end, Bernadette Amaya. She is all things administration, but honestly, she whips us all into shape. She does all the things. She is also a STEM parent. So she also is one of the members of the community that was impacted by May 7th and who we serve. So her story, her heart for the mission at the center is very important for us. She is a voice in the community, but she also is a voice for the mission of the center. Tammy also is a STEM parent, former STEM parent, and Tammy Horlacher is the reason why this event exists. She is our activities coordinator. She runs all things that you would see at the center, and anything that you see live going on our website, Tammy is behind it all. She is a powerhouse, very creative, very important to our team as a voice in the community as well. Gail has been with us. She just had her 1-year anniversary this month. She is our marketing coordinator. So all things that you saw leading up to this event, Gail has put her creative eye on and her heart. She has a heart for social justice, but she also is in real estate. So we thank her so much for her time and her passion and her heart for the mission at the center. I know that Evan has such a heart for our center. He was on a grant inside the school, but then we poached him right after that grant ended to be a part of our team. So I would love for him to share a little bit about his journey and why we are here today.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. So, as Jess said, I've had the honor of working alongside the STEM community since the fall of 2019, responding with All Health Network as students and staff returned to the building. Afterwards, I worked in the school as a school-based therapist for the next 2 years and have since been poached to work at the STEM Center for Strength, where I'm the clinical lead. I feel privileged to be able to do the clinical work that I do with the students that I work with and the services that the center provides, and therapy in general can be so impactful and so helpful for so many people after an event such as May 7th and such as any type of mass violence event. And also, one of the goals of the center is to create a space for community and to be able to learn from one's peers. I hope that our event tonight, Recovery Over Time, is able to further that mission, both within our community and a broader community that's listening live stream or in attendance. I hope that this can be a space where we learn about trauma recovery from mass violence. I hope that this can be a space where we can celebrate some victories and maybe learn from some setbacks. I think perhaps most importantly, I hope that this can be a space where we recognize that recovery after a mass violence event or after any type of trauma is a really unique and individual experience, that it might look different from individual to individual, from community to community, and from family to family. And all of these differences are normal. So I just really want to thank everybody for being here. And for those of you that are listening on the live stream, our advisory board member, JJ, and I will be monitoring the chat. So please, as you do have questions, just go ahead and ask when they come up, and we'll be kind of collecting those and responding at the end. So I'll hand it back to Jess to talk about some logistics, and then we'll get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan. See, he sounds way better than I do. That's why I have him on the team. He's so great. Yes, thank you all. There, he mentioned JJ, who's on our board. It truly does take a village to walk alongside and navigate through our healing journey, and especially at the center. Those who were not on the stage here tonight that we truly consider our team are some of our contracted clinicians. Jenny Robbins is in the audience right now, and wow. Some that you didn't see here tonight. There's a lot of people who really contribute to the efforts in advancing the mission of the center and healing for our community. There are parents who actually participate as facilitators of some of our activities that help navigate through this journey. Elizabeth Brown, who is the school's recovery coordinator, we wouldn't be able to do this without her. She is our liaison with the school. And she is truly, if you need a cheerleader in your life, she is your gal. She really does champion our community and our team, and so thank you. Also, I want to say thank you to our resource tables that are here tonight. We have Rebels Project. If you didn't get a chance to check them out before you sat down, please stop by on your way out. We also have our resource table, where you see Tammy and Bethany. Good to see you. And Colorado Spirit is here today too. So thank you for being here. Just a couple of housekeeping items. The bathroom is down this hall and on the right-hand side, also a drinking fountain if you need some water. I'm a little parched myself. Also, we just want to ask that you be mindful of your neighbor, just kind of your space around you. And if you don't mind turning off or silencing your cell phones, we are live streaming, so thank you for doing that. And also, just to honor this safety and the space, if you don't mind, no flash photography of any sort. However, if you do need to take a moment from this conversation, we want to give you permission to do so, even though we're live streaming. Please, if you need to take a moment, feel free to step aside. Evan, as our clinical team lead, is our clinician on site, so if you do need to talk to someone at any point, please know that you have help and support here, okay? Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being here. And I will let Kyle take over. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you all. And I just want to say that it is a privilege to be sitting up here on the stage with the 7 who are beside me. All of these people are coming tonight to share their stories and their insight into what their recovery from the trauma of gun violence has been like, be it different stages. 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, coming up 23. So thank you all for sharing tonight in advance. Again, huge thanks to Jess and the team at STEM Center for Strength for pulling this together and really being focused every day on bringing people together, and let's get this connectedness so that we can all learn from each other in our healing, in our recovery. So thank you for doing this. I want to introduce our panel. Some of you may know a lot of these people up here, but if not, I'd like to start with Amber Brown, who's right to my left. Amber lives in Lakewood, and back in 2017, she and her lifelong friend went out to Vegas to celebrate her 40th birthday. So they all attended, her whole group, the Route 91 Harvest Festival. It was a great day until it was not. And the gun violence that night killed 58 people, injured hundreds of concert goers. Her friend who she went out with to celebrate, Melissa, still has a messed up shoulder from where she was shot, but one of the friends in your group did not make it. We're sorry about that. Amber is an ambassador with the Rebel Project now, which you saw that table over there. And that started after Columbine years ago. The Rebels Project is very committed to offering support to the unfortunate growing number of people who have faced gun violence, and to help them heal, and to connect survivors, and to let people know they're not alone. Thank you for all that you're doing as an ambassador with them. When it comes to Columbine, Michelle Wheeler is a graduate and has a 16-year-old there now, right? Michelle was a senior at Columbine High School back in 1999. She graduated that spring, and then figured, oh, when I go to college and I meet new friends, life will be different, it'll be just great. Well, a couple years into college, it wasn't so great, and they will share their stories. I'm just introducing them. But through hard work and therapy and a fabo husband, and you got a great daughter and family, she is happy to say she is doing much better on the other side, and also working with the Rebel Project, and also really impassioned about helping survivors and just kind of building community and letting people know, hey, we've got you. Next to Michelle is Frank DeAngelis, who was the principal at Columbine High School back on that day in 1999. Frank is an amazing leader, was before, during, and after, and is a true blue educator and cares for kids. He worked for JeffCo for 35 years before retiring in 2014, and Frank, throughout these last 23 years, has really used what he's learned, has shared his soul and his heart with other people who have gone through tough situations at schools, like what happened at Columbine, and currently works with the Jefferson County School District as a safety consultant, so is still thinking about keeping our kids safe. Michelle, and then, I'm sorry, on the other side is Paula Reed, who was also at Columbine 23 years ago, a longtime teacher at Columbine. Let's see, 30 years you were a teacher there in JeffCo. And you Michelle, you were not her student, right? No, okay, all right, so we can't get any details about that. But Paula is now, although retired from teaching, she is now on the JeffCo school board. So still thinking about school safety, keeping our kids happy, safe, healthy, and getting ready for bigger and better things. So thank you for all your work. And then next to Paula, we have Heather Dearman, who lives in Aurora. She is the chairperson at the 720 Foundation and the Spirit of Aurora. Heather's cousin, Ashley, was paralyzed in the 2012 Aurora theater shooting. Her unborn baby did not survive, nor did Ashley's, this is Ashley, her cousin's 6-year-old daughter, Veronica, died. She's a mom of 5 kids too. And she is all heart, and she's got a great smile. So hopefully we'll see that a lot. Heather's life work now is leading the efforts. She led the efforts for the memorial for those who were impacted by the theater shooting. She provides support across the country for people who have dealt with violence with a Paper Crane Peace Project. You have to check it out. And she's out to prove, which I think we all are, that there is more love in this world than there is hate. So thank you, Heather. And next to Heather is Colorado Representative Tom Sullivan, who also lost someone very special on that night at Century 16, his son Alex. that night forever changed Tom and led him on a path to be an advocate for victims and to sponsor gun violence prevention legislation. He was elected to the State House of Representatives 6 years after Alex died. Is it 6 years? And his goal is to be the voice of change and action for the people of our state. And his goals and the legislation he is pushing for, they're saving lives. So thank you, Tom, for all your work. And then far from me is Carly Posey. Hi, Carly. Carly lives here in Colorado, but back in 2012, Carly was living in Connecticut. And 2 of her 4 children were inside Sandy Hook Elementary School when a gunman entered that building. And her, oopsie, I'll get it in my glasses, it's fine. Her son was in 1st grade, and he was in the classroom and saw his teacher perish as well as a classmate. He ran away, he got away. Her daughter was also in the school. She has 2 other children who are older too, but her other daughter hid and is safe. So her 4 kids are okay. The lack, though, of preparedness within Newtown to respond and then recover really made an impression and gave her purpose. And she's living in Colorado now and is the mission director for the I Love You Guys Foundation. I think probably a lot of people have heard about that. That was started after the Platte Canyon High School tragedy in 2006. The foundation really has assembled real-world solutions that can be brought to the classroom in partnership with first responders. So again, I'm going to stop talking now, and you all want to hear from these people. I just wanted to let you know who everybody was, and they can share more of their stories. But again, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. And everybody, I might direct a question to somebody specific, but if you want to chime in, this is your night. Please share. So definitely chime in. Okay? And then as Jess said, at the end, we will ask you all if you have questions, and as well with our online audience. Okay, so let's begin. And I am going to start with Paula. What would you want loved ones to understand about a survivor's recovery journey from a traumatic event? What do people need to know?
So I think that that what I've seen in common among many, many people who are dealing with trauma, and that I dealt with myself, was first that people expect the healing to go much faster than it goes. And so there's sort of very quickly, when are you going to be yourself again? And so one of the hardest parts is understanding that who you were before it happened is gone. You will never be that self again. But the other piece is none of us is who we were yesterday. It's just that when you go through a major traumatic event, you are more profoundly who you were not the day before. But none of us is who we were yesterday. None of us is who we were a year ago. And you're not supposed to be. You're not supposed to go back. So no matter where you are on your journey, you are you. You are you right now. And you right now may kind of suck. It doesn't stay that way forever. And so people need to understand that it takes time. I would say that I don't say, that I went back to being myself or I went back to normal or whatever, but I didn't really have my feet firmly under me until between years 3 and 5. Those 2 years were really my major breakthrough years in terms of feeling stable, feeling like I could live with who I had become. And for some people it's longer, and for some people it's not that long. And you're not unfeeling and callous if it doesn't take you as long, and you're not broken if it takes you longer. So I think that's important. I think the other thing is that trauma is not logical. And so people who have not experienced trauma will think that they know what you should be going through, or what should trigger you and what shouldn't, and all of those things, and that's part of that time piece, how long it should take you to get over it. So people assume that your triggers are going to be the things that they would consider logical, like the sound of gunfire or something that sounds similar to gunfire. The idea that your trigger might be the smell of Chinese food because that's what they were serving at the school when it happened doesn't occur to the person who's traumatized. So when you have weird triggers, one of mine is strobe lights because of the fire alarm. When you have weird triggers, at first you don't even understand where those are coming from. And so the people in your life don't understand it. And they're like, why would you be afraid of the smell of Chinese food? That doesn't even make sense. There's nothing dangerous. The Chinese food didn't hurt you. It's because of how your brain processes trauma. And when you're going through something very, very dangerous, your brain is gathering as much information as it can, as quickly as it can. And what it does very often is connect those things to, uh-oh, this is a danger sign, even though it's not. So I think if loved ones can understand that your triggers are not always going to be logical, and the other weird thing is sometimes a thing will trigger you and sometimes it doesn't. And who knows why? That's just part of the adventure. And so, no, they don't get to say, well, we had Chinese food 2 weeks ago, it didn't bother you. Look, I don't know what's going on. All I know is I can't handle it tonight, okay? So, really, I think understanding those two pieces, there's no timeline and it's not logical.
And thank you, Paula. Michelle, you said you want to talk about that too. Like, do you tell somebody, okay, this is why I'm feeling this way? Like, how do you let people know what you're going through?
I'm a firm believer in understanding your body and understanding how your body reacts to certain things. My triggers didn't come in until about year 3, and I discovered a new trigger about 2 years ago. And it's something that I can tell when my body is not safe or comfortable, and I can stop myself and I can take a step back. And it takes a lot of time understanding your body. It takes a lot of time understanding your PTSD. And it takes a lot from for your spouses, from your family. You know, my husband always says, in April, I'm a totally different person. I don't see it, but he says, of course you forget things. Of course you're, startled easily. Of course you don't like blue lights or white lights. These are things that I don't normally feel until about March 31st, April 1st, and then I'm a wreck until May 1st. And some years are easy, some years are hard. So it just depends.
Well, thanks for coming on April the 1st tonight.
Thank
you very
no
much.
worries.
Now, Carly and Heather, we were talking about this earlier, Carly. They might not have been inside the physical building where the violence happened, but their lives are just as much impacted. And I wonder if people approach what you went through differently because, how do you respond? How do you let people know what your recovery is looking like?
I didn't really focus on myself in the beginning because I had 4 children that needed my time and energy focused towards them. But one thing I would say along those lines is I had 2 children that were not at Sandy Hook School on that day. They were at the intermediate school. I had twins in 5th grade. And then I had 2 kids that were there. And I want to say that we can't compare trauma in these events. That's what I really learned just in my own family. My husband was actually in Denver when this happened because we moved the next day to Colorado. So we had already bought our house in Colorado, and so he was working in Denver at our new house, and I was there. And so even in my own family, we had all these different experiences on that day, and I could really I really try to not compare or not level trauma. Trauma can't be leveled. If everybody was impacted on that day, and everybody was impacted on that day, like that's the end of the conversation. And then it's about how you go forward after that. It divided our community in Sandy Hook comparing trauma. You got asked where you were in the building, if you were in the front of the building or if you were in the back of the building, like somehow that mattered. to, what support you needed, or just to be able to have a conversation with someone. So you had to almost identify yourself as what happened to you on that day. And that's really not where the conversation should start. It should be moving forward from that. And so my 4 children, I really made it a point to talk to my twins about, yes, this was your hardest day ever, just like it was mine, just like it was their little brother's. And we all had to work through our trauma without comparing it. So I would say that's a big thing that I really tried to do in my own family, and listen to everybody's struggles. And they were all very different. They all had very different things that they needed from me and from the school and from the community. And so I tried to listen to each one of their needs.
Yeah, that's kind of like me. I have 5 kids too, and in the beginning, we were all rallying around Ashley, and so we had what I thought back then was a very unique story, and I didn't realize that all other families were struggling in the same way with their relationships and everything, but we were at the very beginning all traumatized kind of by the media, and that our family's story was out there in the media, and we were kind of, from my point of view back then, we were being kind of told not to talk about it, and that we didn't deserve to grieve because Ashley had lost her child and it was all about her. And I think that my kids, and I have kids that are now ranging in age from 14 to 30, and so they were all in different levels of their life as well. And back then I was just struggling, trying to figure out if they were going to be okay. And then also at the same time hearing the aunts and stuff, keep saying in our ear, don't talk about it, we don't talk about it. And so it's been a hard 10 years, and we didn't come out of it, and some of us haven't yet still. But for me, what I learned, and I would want to tell loved ones, is that, and you all, that your loved ones who, if you've been through a trauma and they might not understand, like, I was very resentful of them when I looked back about and thinking about how hard it was for me back in the beginning, and how it kind of made my children feel bad that they couldn't talk about it. But then, the years pass and you grow in your own way, and you look back, and I realized that I need to give grace to my aunts and other people who might not have understood what we were going through, because they were just dealing it with the best that they could as well. And maybe deep down inside, they felt traumatized too, and they didn't know how to deal with it. So sometimes you might struggle with feeling like someone's not understanding you, and they're trying to say that you're not healing fast enough, but just try to take a breath and realize that you deserve to feel that way, because it did impact you, and that this other person might be struggling too.
I like listening and grace, 2 good words. Frank, what has been especially helpful for you in your healing journey?
I got into counseling immediately.
Okay.
Because as a leader, I was being pulled in every direction, and I felt I had to help the students, the staff, the parents. And one of the most important phone calls I received was from a Vietnam veteran who my mom worked for. He was a chiropractor, and he called me within 24 hours, and he said, Frank, if you don't help yourself, you're not going to be able to help others. And so I got into counseling pretty quickly. And unfortunately, I actually had people telling me, as principal of that school, if you tell someone you're in counseling, they may deem you unfit for duty. And there was a lot of stigma about going around and getting counseling. And one of the things I think as a leader, so many times I think what everyone's talking about, you feel you're the only one going through something. And when situations happened that we were all involved, we lost control. And the last thing you wanted someone to tell you what you needed to do. And I can remember talking to the staff. If I went to my staff and said, you're screwed up, you better talk to someone, and they're saying, no one's going to tell me how to feel. But if I changed that message and said, I don't know about you, but I'm not sleeping at night, I'm having reoccurring nightmares, I've lost my appetite, all of a sudden I see heads nodding. And so I felt as a leader, if I was going to tell people they need to get help, I needed to do it. And so that counseling piece is so important. And the other thing, just feeding off of what some of the others, I think a lot of times people say, well, who suffered more? Hurt is hurt, tragedy is tragedy. It's not a competition. And the one thing that we learned, that I learned, is we could all, at Columbine, we can all experience the same event, but how you deal with it, people deal with it differently. We had people that wanted to continually talk about it, do small group, large group. We had others saying, as soon as I get back to doing what I was doing prior, it's going to help me heal, and some people in between. And that was one of my most difficult tasks, trying to keep everyone together. And it's something similar now that we see with the pandemic, trying to make everyone happy, and it's not working. And so I think that counseling piece is important. I can't tell you the number of times I went to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack, and it was anxiety. And when I told my doctor, he said, the first time you think it's anxiety, you may be having a heart attack. Over the 23 years, I've been in 6 car accidents in the month of April. So if you see a blue Santa Fe anywhere, stay clear in April. But now I'm aware, and I think both Paula and Michelle talked about it. We almost wanted to see the calendar go from March 31st to May 1st, because you just, anxiety and your heart start racing and things like that. Even 23 years later, I'm in counseling, and I go in for maintenance every April. I just go debrief with my counselor. So it wasn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength, and I wouldn't be sitting here. And one last point, I can remember coming home, and my wife said, "You're not the man I married." And I wasn't. As Paula pointed out, we all changed. But where I made my gravest mistake is I went and got my self-help, and I wish I would have brought my wife and my kids in, because they couldn't understand why I was acting the way I was acting. I could not look at people eye to eye because I had so much survivor's guilt. And if I had to do it all over again, they would have been in there saying, this is what Frank is going through. If I got around large family around family members, I didn't want to be around them. I wanted to be secluded. And so they didn't understand that. So that was a mistake. So not only do you have to take care of yourself, but also your family, because whatever event, when you heard that call, shots were fired or people were in a certain area, their heart started racing because they weren't sure you were ever going to walk through that door again.
And you, Amber, you use yoga among other things, but you know, we were talking earlier, I can't get in a space, and you said you tried yoga before you went to Las Vegas, and you know, but now you get it. And talk about how that helps not only clearing your mind, but also physically.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of counseling. I still do as well. But what ended up happening with me is every counselor wanted to push me into EMDR. And I have aphasia, so I don't see in visuals at all. So when people ask me to visualize the event, I go into my mind and cannot connect with my body. So through a lot of different, we always say date your therapist, because I've dated a lot of therapists. Not actual dating, but I've just...
You can dump your therapist. It's okay.
Michelle and Missy taught me that very early on into our friendship. So, but through that, I had one therapist who said, she said, you lived 100% up here and you don't know what your body's doing. So she recommended some trauma-informed massage, and then she also recommended that I get into yoga practice. And so I notice when I don't do yoga, all of the trauma returns directly into my hips, and then I can't walk. It's very hard to walk the next day. So I do yoga 6 to 7 times a week, and I have found that that is my most effective coping mechanism and my most effective form of therapy, besides talking with my therapist, because I was not healthy in my coping mechanisms right after. So
You look like you're in a pose right now.
I am 100% a crisscross applesaucer all the time, every day, all day.
Paula, what has particularly helped you?
For me, the biggest revelation, I really fought the idea of using any sort of medication. I had never, prior to the shooting, had any real issues with mental health. I had never had anxiety. I had felt nervous before, the sorts of things you get nervous before, stage fright sometimes, that kind of thing. But anxiety, I didn't have a word for it. I had never felt that before. And all I knew was that under some circumstances, my skin would start to crawl, and I just wanted to rip it off. It just was driving me crazy. And I would break out in hives, my hair would fall out. And my favorite way to deal with that was to beat myself up and say, you're being ridiculous. It's over. The event is over. You should be moving on. These kinds of reactions, there's just no excuse for them. You need to get it together. Get it together, get it together, get a grip. And 7 years later, 7 years of severe anxiety attacks, we had a bomb threat at school, and we all had to evacuate. And we evacuated to the elementary school where we evacuated to on April 20th, where I learned who had died and who had not. And it was every single trigger. It was leaving the school in mass. It was tightly packed teenagers, which for me is a serious trigger. It was being back in the auditorium where they told parents, if you haven't heard from your kids, go get their dental records. It was every single thing. I was such a mess that a district employee had to drive me home. I couldn't drive. I came back to school the next morning, and another colleague, Eric, and I fell apart completely before first hour, sobbing hysterically. And the whole time, I'm like, nope, gonna be fine, I just have to get a grip. And one of my colleagues came up and said, you know, why don't you just let me split a Xanax between you and Eric? And I'm going, no. Number one, it's gonna drug me out. I don't wanna be drugged out. I don't wanna be dependent on drugs for this. Plus, there's just no excuse. I ought to be able to deal with this. I should not need a chemical to make me do this. And the whole time I'm sobbing hysterically. And you gotta know this guy, Kiki. He holds up his Xanax bottle and shakes it and goes, all the cool kids are doing it. And realizing that I was not gonna be able to function the rest of the day, I finally gave in. And 20 minutes later, I was normal. I wasn't drugged out. I wasn't tired. I was just normal. And I didn't need another pill to stay that way. I just needed to stop the adrenaline flowing so that my higher level thinking and all the good logic that was gonna help me get a grip could find purchase. And that was when I went, oh my God, I've been doing this for 7 years, and all I had to do was take half a stupid pill? And so I went to my doctor. I don't go anywhere without lorazepam. A prescription of lorazepam, which is like 20 little pills, will last me 3, 4, 5 years, like way past the expiration date. I don't take them all the time. But when I feel that hardcore skin crawling, sometimes I can catch it early, and I'll be like, okay, this is anxiety. It's time to breathe. It's time to step back. It's time to know, like, there's all these other things that you can do. You stop. You breathe deeply. You notice what is around you. You notice all of the things that make you feel secure and safe and that help you remember that you're not in that time and you're not in that space. And it works, but sometimes it doesn't. And I am not too proud to pop a lorazepam. So like there would be times that we would have lockdown drills, and Frank would know that I didn't do lockdown drills well because they were always in the room I was in the day that it happened. And he came to me one time and he said, are you gonna be okay? And I said, I got my little pill. I'm gonna be just fine. And so yeah, I would absolutely tell you, don't be too proud. I know people that, that ended up on Prozac or whatever, but they found the chemical that just helped them get through. And understand that you can't always control what's happening to your brain electronically and chemically. So that is a huge piece. I do want to second, just for a moment, what Frank said about getting help for your spouses, because your spouses, if you are traumatized, your spouse is going to be dealing with that as well. And what I didn't understand for a number of years about my husband is that my husband lost his wife that day, because I never became who I was again. And of course that was trauma. My daughter's 26. She talks about the fact that she never knew the mother she should have had. That people tell her that I changed, and she doesn't remember who I was. So she never got to have the mother she should have had. And that doesn't mean I was a bad mother, but it does mean that she lost something. So remember that your families are losing something too.
Amber, and any of you can chime in as well, have your responses to certain stimuli changed over the years?
Yeah, so right after coming back, I would say that I had kind of the stereotypical responses to things like fireworks and crowds. And then as I exposed myself more to those stimuli, I was able to cope with those. I still go to concerts. I am fine with fireworks now. But now it's very illogical things, like I can't drive in snow. I was fine driving in snow, even though I'm from California. I was fine driving in snow up until the shooting and even for a couple of years after. And now I get paralyzing fear to where I have to basically lock myself in my house until the snow is over. So you can imagine the last 2 months have been real fun for me.
Every other day.
And to the point where I can't go to work and my poor kid has to stay home from school. So I think as I expose myself to that, it'll probably become less, but then it'll be something else that'll trigger that response. So it does shift and it ebbs and flows, and to the point of other panelists, there's no real rhyme or reason of when it's gonna hit or what it's gonna be. And I get a lot from my partner, it's just snow, like just drive in the snow. And I'm like, I'm going to punch you. Because it's really hard to understand why that trigger that has nothing, I got shot at in the desert. So there was nothing that would connect that specific trigger to my shooting. It's just that lack of control and the fact that I can't control my surroundings and the people around me that I think cause that anxiety.
And you recognize that. Anyone else? Is there anything that was so troubling that's gotten better, or new things, or?
Well, I could say, I mean, a trigger is stupid people. Okay, I no longer have the patience for somebody. I mean, when you know, I mean, and it could be the simplest thing, but it's like, you don't understand. I mean, this is precious time. This doesn't matter, and you're making a big deal about it, you know, and I can get incredibly, you know, angry and have lost all patience, you know, with that. So, you know, I spend a lot of time, you know, walking away from somebody because it's like, you know, this isn't worth it, and away we go.
Frank?
One of the things that really helped me, and again, this was with my counselor, we did not finish at Columbine. We had about a month left, and we had to go over to Chatfield. But when the new school year was starting as a principal, I had to report after July 4th. And I can remember being in that building, and we were going through major reconstruction, and there were loud sounds, and I was having anxiety attacks. And every time I walked out of the office, I envisioned that gunman coming towards me. What I saw that day, I envisioned those kids lying in a pool of blood. And I was struggling. I could not stay in that building very long, and I went to my counselor, and he said, Frank, if you're going to continue to be the principal of that school, you need to change that mindset. And he literally walked me through each of the students, and he said, tell me something about Lauren Townsend. Well, I remember her playing volleyball. Tell me something about Rachel Scott. I remember her on the stage. And so it was changing that mindset of not mourning their death, but celebrating their life. And I had to do that because when we walked, we had teachers that could not walk down a certain hallway because they were there, or as Paula pointed out, in that classroom. So we had to replay that. If not, I would have never been able to stay for 15 years after.
I love that. Yeah. Michelle?
And Frank can attest to this, my hardest day was when I took my daughter to kindergarten. And I ended up in your office. And I was like, I can't do this. I had no control. I had just all the fears. And Frank said, you need to breathe, and you need to let it go. That I can't put my pain and my stress on my daughter. She's now 16. She goes to Columbine. when she was in kindergarten, you know, I started telling her, Mommy's sad because her friends went to heaven. And then as she got older, Mommy's sad because 2 boys made sad choices and they sent my friends to heaven. And slowly it's built on. And now that she goes to Columbine, she does know the general of what happened, but she does not know where I was. She does not know where I hid. And she will not know until she is out of school, because I don't want her to go into the auditorium and say, Mom hid there. Mom got shot at here, you know. Mom ran with a poor, tiny little freshman, smaller than you, dragging her down the hall. I don't want her to know those things. I want her to enjoy Columbine. And that has been probably the hardest thing, is as a mother and as a survivor, to let go of that control and let her have a life that doesn't have fear.
That's amazing.
I think I would want to also point out, this probably happens to everyone here, a trigger of every time that there's another shooting on TV. We all, every time you see that happen again, everyone's saying, why is this happening again? And then you're in that group of people who feel like you're going to be forgotten because the next one happened.
Well, and just really quick, when it comes to because I think TV and the triggering of subsequent shootings, and so, Kyle, I didn't recognize you because I have not watched television news for 23 years.
It's okay. It's okay.
I
don't know if I would either.
Literally have not. And people say, well, how can you be so uninformed? And I'm like, excuse me, I read the New York Times every morning.
Yeah.
And I am not uninformed. I read the Colorado Sun. But I get all of my news in print because I control what I see. What I get, newspapers, beautiful thing, they're designed to do who, what, where, when, right away, and if that's all I want, that's all I have to have. I don't suddenly get flooded with images I can't handle.
That's good. Tom, let me ask you, how have the questions people have asked you about what happened back in 2012, how have those questions changed? We're coming up on 10 years. Or are they changing? Or are your responses changing?
Well, I'm not sure that the questions, I mean, because it's their first opportunity to ask that question.
Okay.
And I've gotten out in front of the issue.
Yeah.
So when there is another shooting, I'm one of the ones that they contact, especially as an elected, as somebody who's out there, and I will answer those questions. I've done, college students are doing their theses on mass shootings and the trauma, and there's always that you will give them all of the background, and then it will lead up to that, okay, tell me about that day. And so then I start from, waking up at 2:40 in the morning and making coffee and going to work and driving by I go through the entire thing because it's just right here. It's all I've got to do is turn quickly or something, and I can, as I start to talk, everything, I remember who was sitting here and who said this and at what time did we get this information, and all of the way through we would do everything. But as far as the day-to-day types of things, and they told us this early on, when someone will say to you, hey, how are you doing today? And everybody just thinks that's a normal thing. It's they don't really want to know how you are. That's just a greeting. That's how we would greet people. But having been through something, it's, that's kind of a dangerous thing to say to somebody. So I used to, for the longest time, give them the answer that they wanted. Hey, things are great. Okay. But after a time, it's like, now I'm telling them, I slept for 3 hours last night. I'm still dealing with the committee hearing I had yesterday and having to listen to all of this. And it's, and I know and are alerted to all of the anniversaries of every other one. And those have that kind of, you feel that, and you don't know what you're feeling, but you're just off a little bit from what you would normally be, and it takes a while, and it's like, oh, this is the Parkland anniversary. This is the 3rd year of that. I'm going to hear some information about that, and so I flat out tell them, my son was murdered 506, Fridays ago. How do you think I should be feeling? And they've gotten to the point where it's maybe so there's not a lot of people who want to come around and greet Tom in the morning, and that's fine, but it's like, just say hello. I mean, hello is enough. Hello is enough, and we can all move through this, getting around one another, in the morning until things warm up.
Hello. Okay. That's simple but good. Heather, when we go through trauma, things look different. They feel different. They sound different. How we perceive them, how we perceive other people. It's all like there's just so much going through our heads. Were there certain messages, be it TV or even just things that you just heard in society that you just had to put out of your mind that were just too much?
I would have to say that the messages I had to put out of my mind in order to heal were that it wasn't okay for me to feel sad and try to work through something, because it didn't happen to me and it happened to my cousin. And so it wasn't until at least 2015 until I came out of that cloud and realized that everyone has their own story to share, no matter where you were that day, and sharing your story is important. But I mean, I guess it didn't take me that long to figure it out. I just noticed in my day-to-day interactions and about people that I would meet when I was talking about Ashley or trying to help Ashley, I noticed that if I just was honest and cried and was vulnerable, that somehow I would connect with the other person, and then they would end up telling me what's going hard in their lives, and we would make this soul-to-soul connection, realizing that we're both humans that hurt. And so I think I started putting it into practice, just being myself, and if I was feeling sad, talking about Ashley or something, I would just let it out. And then it's also made me realize that when you do that, then it lets the love in, because you're opening your heart, you're opening this wound, and then other people around you will come in and they will comfort you, and they will give you that comfort that you need, and then realize later that you're actually helping them too, because you're allowing them to share their story. And so I think the message that, that's part of my cultural family message heritage, or whatever you want to call it too, where we were kind of shamed, or not purposefully, or told to keep things inside. I realized, I think too, after a while when we were feeling comfortable enough to talk to Ashley, because a lot of times we were told don't bring things up to her, I found out years later she was like, she didn't even know that we were all in the hospital rallying against her, because she wasn't told that, and she didn't know that a bunch of people were sending cards to her, and it was things that she told me she wished she would have known. And so it's a lot of times it's hard for people to want to approach someone who's lost somebody and talk about their child, but they think about their child every day anyway, and they do want you to mention them and remember them. We were told not to mention Veronica's name if we did any stories or anything like that. And the minute we started doing that and started saying her name and remembering her, it's almost like, I'm just looking at that purple up there, thinking of her because that's her favorite color. It's almost like she shone through, like we opened our hearts and let her shine through. And she, as a child, was such a beautiful, innocent, joyful little soul. And she looked at everyone in the world as someone equal, and she made everyone her friend, and that's what she would want us to be doing too. And so I just try to keep her in my heart and keep in mind that the loved ones that we lost would want us to be connecting with one another and be joyful and be happy. There's still sad times, but a lot of the times I just have to look at something and I see her in, a butterfly or in nature that she likes so much, and it will remind me to stay grounded and remember that, love will connect us all and we can get through it.
And how is Ashley doing?
Ashley is my hero, and she doesn't like to be called that. Just the fact that she can get up every day and have a smile on her face. She's always been so humble and shy, and anytime I asked to help her or something, she's always wanted to help Stefan, who was another one who was permanently injured, and I just love that about her. But she still is having her ups and downs and her struggles, and that's one of the things all of us I know want to work on and work towards, is like remembering that victims need help 10 years out, and the help is always there, and it's wonderful right when it happens, but as years go on, they're forgotten about, and we need to remember that, even somebody who was affected and wasn't injured could be triggered and see this today, and they want help now, and they should be able to go get help now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Carly, how does mindfulness and listening and insight and grounding skills and understanding the impact of the trauma, how does all that play into recovery? I know that's a lot, but I just mentioned those 6 things are a lot to take on. But when we take one by one, how does that really help with the recovery in your family?
Well, I think for my family, 6 of us, we all needed something different, and this wasn't in my parent manual to know about trauma and help each one of my kids at different ages. And still today, my twins are now 20, and my daughter, who was in 4th grade, she's 18 now. And then my youngest, Riken, who was a 1st grader on that day, is a sophomore in high school. And so there's different challenges as they get older and have different experiences in their lives, since they were so young when this happened. And for me, really the overriding thing that has helped us is our faith, our foundation in God, and the control aspect. That was such a big thing for me, is that I honestly thought I could control everything before this day happened. I mean, I worked on my marriage. I did all the right things. I sent my kids to a good school. I did all the right things, and I didn't really think anything bad could happen to me, right? Until it did. And so I lost all of that control, and I got wrapped up in the why, and how am I ever going to send my kids back to school again, because this could just happen all the time. And so I had to ground our family, and my husband was a big part of this, is to, there's risk in life, no matter what we do, anywhere we go, whatever we do, we have to look at that from I'm not the one in control, and thank goodness I'm not. And so that was our way to talk to our kids about why we're sending them back to school. Riken, my youngest, he couldn't be in a classroom all day until he was at the end of his 5th grade year. So he would go to school for, an hour a day, 2 hours a day, we'd build it up kind of thing. And so it was a very long process. And I like to talk about it as our brains were injured. I think we all know what to do when there's a physical injury. Well, this is the same thing. All of our brains were injured on that day, so it's going through that process of getting counseling. We got right into counseling right away. Thank goodness my husband was aware that we needed it. He was looking at the big picture of things. I was just trying to survive like the moment of my kids melting down and not being able to go to the grocery store and doing normal life things. And he was seeing the bigger picture of it. But our faith in God was really the overriding thing that has helped us get out of bed in the morning, do the things that we need to do. And my kids are very healthy mentally today. They still struggle. Riken talked about it all the time when he was younger, and that really helped him. My 4th grader, she didn't want to talk about it at all ever. She wanted to pretend like it never happened. So she wanted to ignore it. And it came back to her when she got into high school. The Parkland shooting happened while she was in high school. The STEM shooting happened while Amila was in high school in Douglas County. And so, those things came back to her and she needed to work on it. So she went back to counseling, and her struggle years were her high school years. And so, it's just different for everybody. So being a parent of all those different kids with different needs was a challenge, and I had to kind of navigate my way through that. I didn't have a resiliency center to go to, which is, I'm so glad we're making progress on this, and that you guys are all here and we're all doing this together. Nobody's alone either. We're all here for each other, and call me anytime. If you guys have kids my age, or Frank was a huge help to me early on. I met Frank right when I moved here in 2013, and he embraced my kids, helped me just navigate what they were going through in my kids' school. And so I know I said a lot in that, but you asked me a lot of questions, so there's not a right answer either, right? It's different for everybody, and you just have to own where you are at the time. And like I said, Amila, my fourth grader, it took her all the way till she was in high school to talk about it. And when she finally did is when she could, move through that healing process. But I had to wait, 6-7 years for her to finally, talk about it. And I learned a lot of new things of what she went through. So it's a journey.
Yeah. The resiliency centers, like you talked about, are so vital. Why is it so important to not shun people away and embrace the community? You're both so busy with the Rebel Project, but how important is it? I mean, again, way to go. It's so good to have everyone here tonight. And then tell everybody about what you've learned. Tell one friend what you learned. Let's grow this community of support. Why has it been so important for you, Michelle?
It's helped me heal. It's helped me help other people heal. The Rebels Project was brought about after the Aurora shooting, and we thought, well, we didn't have this, but we know what they're going through, so maybe we can help. It's grown. We have, I don't know how many communities around the world, people who have celebrated 52 years of anniversary from their shooting. I mean, it's incredible, the gains that we have made. I'm an ambassador through the Rebels Project with Amber, and I run the virtual support groups. So every other month, I meet with people online, and we sometimes go in with a topic, and sometimes we just go in and trauma vomit whatever our feelings are that day. So it has been amazing. It has helped me touch other lives and let them understand that this is your new normal, and you're gonna be okay, and there's gonna be great days, and you're gonna laugh, and there's gonna be hard days, and you're gonna cry, and it's okay.
It's good to have that space and those people.
Yeah.
And Frank, you have grown your community so much in 23 years.
There's something that I think needs to be addressed. In the class I worried the most about was the class of 99, because they only had a month, and then they were off to college, they moved out, and they didn't have the support. And I really worried about them. All the people that came back to Columbine, the classes of 2000 through 2002, it was tough, but we had each other. And I also worry about staff members that had to leave their school. And one of the things that was so helpful for Columbine is we made a promise to stay together, and we had each other to support. But a lot of times when staff members end up leaving, going to other schools, they don't have that support system in place, and all of a sudden a fire alarm goes off, or you have some type of training, and they're re-traumatized. And one of the things that's so important that I share when they do, students go to other schools or staff members go, they need to let their people know what they experienced, because it is different. And so many times we forget about those people, and that class of 99 will always have a special place in my heart. And I'll never forget when they came back for the 10-year reunion. That was the first time many of them had been back in that building. And it was, I think, somewhat healing, but also a lot of anxiety-ridden. So make sure that you take care of the people that are no longer part of that community, to reach out to them, because they're suffering and they don't have the support that others have.
And when you went into a college, Michelle, like when you went to college, I know you tried to block out what had happened in high school, but did you hear an alarm go off in the new environment and still
I noticed right off the bat that I needed a classroom with windows and at least 2 exits. And I always looked where the exits were. I sat near them. After the shooting, the day of the shooting, I ended up going to my sister's house. And my mother, who, bless her heart, she's a little 5'2" Mexican. She has 7 kids. She walked up with a bottle of Jack in her hand and said, "We are never talking about this day. It didn't happen. If you talk about the perpetrators, you're letting them win. So I don't want to hear it." And that stubborn little woman has kept her promise going on 23 years now. So when I went into college, I was in the class of 99, and this man is amazing to our class. But it was hard, and I thought, I'm fine. I can do this. I can do hard things. And I started noticing that I was saving pills, and not consciously, but just putting them away. And I couldn't feel anything. My body was numb. I was angry. I snapped at people. I was playing soccer 7 nights a week just to get it out of my body. Nothing was helping. And I worked at an indoor soccer field. And one night I thought, you know what? I'm just going to kill myself. I'm going to get rid of this pain. I had brought the pills to the car. I was going to take the pills in the car in the parking lot and end everything. And that night, my husband, who's a 96 graduate, was playing soccer, and he asked me on a date. And I thought, oh, that's a good feeling. Maybe I won't do this. And that night, that man saved me. So moving on from that, he knew, he started recognizing signs, and he's like, you're not all there. And he pushed me on to counseling. I did EMDR at year 3 and at year 5. At year 5, I did it in the school because I wanted, the school is a building. The school didn't hurt me. So I wanted to be able to go into the school, and we would walk my path, and he would put me into an EMDR session, and it's like a movie in your head. You relive and you process through each frame of your trauma, and then he'd pull me out and he'd say, okay, what do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you see? And everything I saw in my brain, I did not see when I was awake. And because of that, I can now go into the school. Every year on the 20th, I go in, I retrace my steps with my husband. Each year I feel something different, or I discover something different about myself. And then we end up in the library at 11:21 where Frank reads the names. And it's something I haven't been able to do for 2 years, and I've missed it, and I can't wait to spend it with my family.
Oh, family. And Heather, I want to get up and hug each one of you when you're done, but I have to keep this going. You guys are amazing. Heather, with your Crane project, you are reaching out to people you don't know who are outside of Colorado and inside. You recognize the importance of maybe people who aren't allowed to talk about it. Hey, there's someone that wants to listen.
Yeah, I think it was a beautiful thing. I remember back, it happened at midnight on the 19th, but the night of the 20th, the whole community came together and had a vigil across the street from the theater, and that's when I first noticed community coming together. And then, like 3 days later, they had a vigil at the city building which is across the street from the theater. And we were in the special family section, and just looking out at the hundreds of people that were there to just wrap their arms around us just really touched me that day. It really made me feel supported and that we mattered. And so when I finally became a part of the 720 Foundation to start building the memorial, I really knew in my heart how much it meant, those messages of love and support on banners to us. And so sadly, more shootings started to happen right about then in 2015, and we would put banners out for people to sign to send to the communities that had experienced what we had. And then when our memorial was, our artist decided to build our memorial based on paper cranes from someone who sent them to us in 2012, and he had people at Starbucks write notes in the paper cranes. We had 1,000 paper cranes. So we decided, hey, instead of doing banners, let's have people write notes of love on paper cranes and assemble them on a wreath and send them to that community. So, and it's been really just a special project because people come in, like I said, and you end up sharing stories, and everyone wants to feel like they want to do something, and that really does matter. We know it meant to us, a lot to us, and the thing about our wreaths is sometimes we don't collect enough for a while, and the wreath doesn't get to that other community for a few months or something, but that's good because they get it right when they need it. And I remember when a bunch of Dallas shootings had happened, and I was getting ready to mail the wreaths out to Dallas, and another one had come up, and I was crying, and I was thinking, how can I possibly ask people to give more love and send more paper cranes? And I really couldn't do it, and my heart was just hurting. And at that moment, the postal person came up to my desk, and he had given us our mail, and it was a letter from the Tree of Life Synagogue. And their shooting had been so much more before that, and they had a note to us how much that meant to them that we had sent it. We had originally planned, when we were doing the paper cranes, to fill up this huge clear box full of cranes to show that there's more love in the world than hate. And we had it pretty full, and lately we've been having to use a lot of them. But I think I love the fact that even though the supply goes down, we always have a replenishment of love. It's like love is never ending. And, you know, you get discouraged at a point where you think, if this happens again, how could I possibly give more love? I'm already so hurt. But it's there, and it might not, you know, and you have everyone in your community and everyone around you to help replenish that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these 7 people are reminding us over and over with each response that no one is alone, right? No one is alone. And everyone's recovery is different. A different child in your house, you know, different people that you were with that night in Las Vegas, it's also different. And I know you all have shared a lot about the obstacles, the challenges you face, but and how some of you have overcome them. And Evan was talking earlier about, are there things to celebrate that you're like, I did this, and that gave you kind of a skip in your step for a little bit that, okay, this is going in the right direction. You know, yes, there are bad days, but there are small victories. Can you share any of those with our audience?
I can tell you that there are 2 that come to mind. The first was when a group of us went to see the Jason Aldean concert. He was playing when the shooting happened. First of all, I don't even like Jason Aldean's music, but we decided as a group that we were going to go back and finish that show.
Okay.
So about 40 of us went in different areas of the venue, but a large group of us were on the lawn. And he played When She Says Baby, which was the song that he was playing. And we all cried. But afterwards, we all like got in this big group hug, and we're like, we did it. We finished. I will never see another Jason Aldean concert again.
You don't need to.
But that was just something that really, it was like we did it, we got through it, and we finished it. And then I had not been back to Vegas since the month after I went to see Dana's Cross from Greg Zanis. The month after, but I was still very shell-shocked, and I don't think it registered what I was doing, so it wasn't like traumatic at that time because I didn't feel it yet. But this last July, Michelle and Missy back there went with me to Vegas to walk my path, which I had never done. And that was just really like, it was an amazing experience. We almost had a little bit of a supernatural experience because we had this chain link going across where I ran out, and it had all these little wooden hearts, and I was walking up and down, and I'm like, I don't see Dana's heart anywhere. I don't know where she is. And Missy goes, there's one sitting up, it's standing up on end right here. What is this heart? And it was Dana's heart. And it was almost like she knew we were there. And that was another moment where I'm like, I did it. I walked my path, and we were supposed to be there. It was blazing hot and miserable.
It was 115 degrees.
Oh my
And we walked that path and we got in a car and we drove to San Diego.
Okay. Anyone else want to share?
I think just being here is a victory
Yes.
for me, and saying yes to it, because I mean, I'm still a little off where like I didn't share this forum on my personal Facebook page. I shared it on our 721, but anytime I'm doing an interview or anything like that, I still feel like I can't share it with my family. But I still say yes to coming here because I know and I've learned that sharing your story helps others, and it heals me, and just to encourage others that it can heal you too if you share your story.
And I'm sure just listening from each other, you've learned just from the seven, you all have learned tonight too.
Kyle, can I say, I've just, listening to everybody here, I've heard the number 3 several times about when they were able to start kind of kicking into, beginning the next process. And so I'm sitting here thinking about, where were we? And we had a trial. We didn't, we still hadn't had the ability to start, okay? We had starts and stops with trial getting ready, with where everybody was at that. And so we didn't even, get started on the next process. And there's a lot of people that are out there. I mean, I'm thinking of the people up in Boulder. They don't know when they're going to get to start. Down in, Colorado Springs, Planned Parenthood, they're still waiting to start. Parkland, I see the parents, hear their stories, the things that they're doing. I mean, I've had an opportunity to talk to them and said, you need to, until maybe you get through, because that's going to be a whole nother process for you to go through, have to be sitting in a room, with your son's killer and dealing with and reliving and doing all of that. And then, once you get started into the process, you're always in the process. But so that's why, and I've watched, the folks, certainly from Columbine. I think I was paying attention, early on. I was aware, but then it wasn't until after, it happened to us, and then I watched them. I listened to them. So, and they've already had their 10-year. Ours is coming. They've already had their 15. So by seeing and listening, I have an expectation as to what that is going, to be like. And that's what I try to let, when the new ones happen and they're reaching out, and it's, you try to give them, kind of, well, this is how it's worked, for us. This is what, could be coming your way.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I didn't even think about that. I mean, you think about the initial awfulness, but then sitting in trial, or a delay in a trial, or, waiting for the trial, that just compounds it so much.
Well, and I didn't want to, we're not keeping score. It's like,
No,
you
that's
didn't have to do it, I had to do it.
Yeah.
And, mine was worse than, I didn't,
Just
I
another-
didn't
no, it's
mean it to
insight.
come
I
across.
didn't know, it's
To
insightful.
come across like that, but there's, again, and I can, understand the others who are, they're waiting to
people in
get
Boulder.
started on the
Next chapter.
getting rid of,
Right.
the acceptance of their trauma and to find out, how to do it. And, in a good case, it moves smoothly through. Most of these cases, there's starts and stops.
Yeah.
You think you're getting ready to go, and then they're told, no, okay, we're going to have to wait, and then you have to, ratchet it back
No,
down.
I'm glad you shared that, and I think that's great. You're letting people know what to expect. Anyone else? We have a few more minutes before we open up for questions.
You were talking about being able to see us and sort of be able to gauge kind of like, what happens in the future. And so I've gone, 6 weeks after the Sandy Hook shooting, a colleague and I went out to Sandy Hook and talked to the teachers there. I went out to Marshall County. I went to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas twice and spoke with their teachers. And I always say the most important thing that I do when I go out there more than anything else is I stand in front of them looking normal, promising them that someday normal comes back to you. It's not the same, but it's okay. That I like who I am, that I am happy. I am happy for long stretches of time. Because for a long time, it feels like that's never going to happen. And so I just tell them, if there's nothing else that I do for you, just know that I'm standing in front of you, a happy person. And that is there for you. And I can't tell you when it's going to happen for you, because it doesn't happen the same for everyone. And people do have different stumbling blocks that we did not have. So there's that. It leaves you with weird gifts. It has left me with the absolute certain knowledge that tomorrow is a probability, not a guarantee. That I'm probably going to be alive tomorrow. So I should plan my life as though I will be alive. But I may not be. So I better not leave anything unfinished. I better not leave behind things that I would regret if I couldn't take them back. And you were talking about that you have less patience with people. And I actually consider that a gift. I have come to understand that the only currency I have is time. So you will not waste mine. Because I don't know that I have tomorrow. So I'm not dicking around with you today. And I consider that an absolute gift.
Thank you.
And I'll just say, I like the last question about looking at the good. It's very hard to see anything good for many, 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 many years, and it's still hard to see it. But I think finding it and acknowledging it and speaking it is really important. I tell my kids, you wouldn't have met this person. I wouldn't know Frank DeAngelis if this didn't happen to my family. And so those relationships that you make out of these horrible tragedies are like no other relationship you would ever be able to have. And so I think celebrating those good things is needed to get you to the next good thing. And it really made our family closer together. And so we have to celebrate that a lot. And I'll just leave it with that. I think we really have to see some good and speak the good things that have come through the awful things.
All right. Does anyone have a question for any or all of our panelists? She was first. Wait, I think we have a microphone. Okay, thank you, Jess. And I will repeat the question just so for our live stream audience too.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I just honor your voice, your stories, your tears, your laughter, your truth. It's raw, it's vulnerable. Everyone in this audience and online is either a community member, a student, an administration, an extended family member, a parent, and someone who was impacted directly by either being a part of a trial. Kyle, she covered Columbine. That is a member of our community that's impacted. So we are all receiving from you today. So I just honor your voice and say thank you. And so the questions that were asked today, our advisory committee put together. And so we may not have hit all the questions. So we're opening it up to you, the audience, online and here. So we'll go ahead and just open it up if we have any questions. And I don't know if you want to, do you want to speak?
I can talk.
Okay, girl, yeah, girl.
It's not as much a question, it's more like a statement of the impact of your paper cranes. 5 months after I went through my own trauma, I moved to Pittsburgh for my first year of college. And as part of my own healing, my friends and I, we went to the Tree of Life Synagogue for the 1-year anniversary. And I do want you to know that your cranes are still on display there. Aww. And I made a mental note of it because, get this, a few years prior, I had a teacher in high school, I went to Denver School of the Arts, who had us do paper cranes for the Parkland shooting, just kind of as an homage to that. And that teacher was a survivor of Columbine. And I wanted you to know that when I realized
That's
that,
amazing.
I made those notes.
You don't know how much I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It was such a big part of my own healing to see those cranes, so I just wanted you to
Thank
know.
you.
Did you want to share? Are you okay with speaking? Sure. Okay.
My question is for Frank. Every time there's another shooting, I always think for school shooting survivors and all shooting survivors, I just think those poor people, they have to relive this. And so I just wanted to know, especially the Michigan school shooting, which I felt that was preventable, possibly. I just wanted to know what a day is like when you hear of another shooting.
Whenever I start getting texts, you're in my thoughts and prayers within 5 minutes of media calls, and I know there's another school shooting. And it does take you back. I remember witnessing Parkland and those kids running out with their hands up. It took us right back to Columbine in 1999. But that's where the counseling piece comes in. And I'll share a good example. We were getting ready for a day of service last year at Columbine High School. I'm sitting in the library, and I'm actually looking at the names of the 13, and my phone starts buzzing, and it was March 22nd when the Boulder shootings happened. And all of a sudden, I'm not thinking this is 2021. I'm right back to 1999. My heart starts racing. But I learned a technique from my counselor. It's called touchstone. And I have a couple of religious medals around my neck. And all of a sudden, I'm grabbing those medals saying, this is not April 20th, 1999. This is March 22nd. And immediately, when I go through these, and right now I'm dealing with 3 school districts that have had school shootings, and I relive everything we went through. That's why I have my counselor on speed dial. And that's important, and also my faith is important to me. So I have a good support system in place. I don't ever have to travel that journey alone. And I made a comment, and I think we're all part of it. I can remember it was a week after, and I said I just joined a club in which no one wants to be a member. And we're all part of that, and we're going to reach out, and I think we all make a commitment that all of us, and even though Columbine's been 23 years, we're going to continue to reach out as everyone here because we got lessons to learn from each other. And I think when we say something, we know what you're feeling. We really do because we've been there.
I just have a quick question for Michelle. So the STEM shooting happened when I was a senior, and it was like 2 weeks before graduation. And so with that, there was definitely something where graduation happened, and then we just went to college, and that was like that. And with that, I found it to be very difficult to make friends in college and
they deal with situations that are chaotic. And sorry. Do you have any advice?
So I've been to college 3 times. I actually just graduated with my bachelor's in ECE this year. It took me, I did 2.5 years in college, and I didn't make friends with anybody. There were some Columbine survivors who went to Metro with me, and we just kind of see each other, but we didn't really want to make eye contact because we were totally cool with everything and nothing was wrong with us. And that was a mistake. I wish I would have said, today sucks, you know? College was hard. I did my second round, I had to take 2 classes to continue teaching. And I did it online. And just walking into college to the advisor, I started having heart palpitations. And so this round, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it for myself. It's never too late to go back. And I finished, and I'm proud of myself. And it was hard, but I did it. When you're this fresh out of your trauma, it's hard to make any connection. And Missy back there at Rebels Project has said it, a hug from a survivor is different from a non-survivor. Unfortunately, we are in a family. It's a family I don't want to be a part of, but we're a family. And it's, you know, it will get better. It will get easier. You'll make connections. My husband was not in the shooting. He graduated in '96. His sister was in the shooting. She graduated in '99 with me. It took me 6 years into my marriage, so 8 years being together, for me to even tell him my story. I have 3 stories, A, B, and C. A is, C is like, yeah, I was there. B was, I was there, I had 96 bullets past my body, and shrapnel went through my leg. My third one is the nitty-gritty, the smells, the tastes, everything. And it took me 8 years into this man who saved my life to be able to say, so this is what's going on. And he took it, he processed it, and he doesn't understand it, and I don't want him to understand. I don't want to know what it's like to be a parent of and have my child go through it. I don't want them to know what it's like to look down a barrel of a gun and know that my life could end. So it gets better. You'll make connections. You will find your niche. The person I was April 19th, 1999 is not who I am today. And I would not have done what I've done today if that shooting had never happened. So it gets better. It's hard to leave. I wish I had the community. Back there we have Missy. She's a graduate of '02. I had 4 amazing years at Columbine, and I had 1 really crappy day. She had 1 year of great high school and 3 really hard years. My journey is no better than hers. My story is no better than hers. But we have connected because we're the same. And you'll find those connections.
Well, and can I say just really quickly that because we do talk about the positive things, and I think that that is really important, but there's also a need to honor something else. So one of the ways that I dealt with my trauma was to write, and I ended up having 5 books published. And so that's great, and that's an achievement that I'm pleased with, that I would not have done if I hadn't been through the shooting. I would trade every single one of those books for those kids back. Make no mistake. I would trade every bit of it for those children back. I can't do that. So please understand that when we talk about the positives, we're not forgetting that it would have been better to not have this happen.
I think when starting therapy, you worry that you're going to forget and you're going to process and move on. Moving on after trauma does not mean you forget. I hold those 13 with me everywhere. But you learn how to live, and I live for those 13.
Do we have any other questions here? Okay, great.
Thank you all so much for being here and for being vulnerable and sharing your stories. I am one of 4 full-time staff members that make up the Boulder Strong Resource Center. So I know how impactful, Jess, you and your work are, so thank you for putting this together. We just went through our 1st year anniversary with our community, and we're still learning how to best support that community. And so I'm curious, after the 1st year, what did you have that you needed and that you're grateful that you had support-wise, and what do you wish that you had had?
So we had a similar center for Vegas, the Las Vegas Resiliency Center. We were pretty lucky that we were also well-funded. That's not always the case with resiliency centers. I work for a bank that was in the same parking lot as King Super, so we had a lot of impacted employees. Continued mental health, I think, is the biggest barrier, because once the grants or the sponsorships run out, you're left to try and afford that on your own or to source that on your own. So the more long-term mental health care that there is, and varied support, because like I said, not every therapy is going to work for every person. So art therapy, movement therapy, massage therapy, I know you guys have had that in your center because I've been in contact with some of your people. I think that varied therapy, but just the fact that that's not going to stop, that need's not going to stop. So I know 5 years coming up on your grant here, I hope you guys are around for at least 20 more, because they're going to need it 20 years out. They're going to need it 52 years out from Heath High. Like, you're always going to need it. So continuing to be there and continuing to offer that support, I think, for me would be what I would answer.
Being 1 year out, what I remember is that everything was a fog. I don't even remember what happened a year out. And so I'm sure there's a lot of survivors who are from that shooting at King Soopers that aren't ready to get the help yet. And so, yeah, I echo what she says, is they're going to be ready years later, not just now.
Anyone else?
Anyone else want to speak to that? 1 year out.
I'm going to second what a fog 1 year out was.
I don't remember really.
And I can say, as a teacher at the time, 1 year out, you are so busy taking care of kids that you have no idea what is happening to you. I think one of the reasons that I started to hit breakthroughs at year 3 is because the last of the kids who had been through it had graduated. So there was space to start to think about what I was dealing with. So I just think a big piece of it is to understand that there are people who it will be years before they even figure out that they are impacted. They're busy taking care of other people or being in denial or whatever. So it is as we were told over and over and over again, it was a marathon, not a sprint.
And I think I was thankful for too, and hopefully most centers are doing this now as well, is like, I do remember that victims advocates did not ask when we called for help what our level of survivorship was. So they allowed, if I had family members or cousins call, they didn't question like, you don't get these services, you weren't injured. But so hopefully that's the case now for you all too, that people who do come to the center might just be somebody who lived in an apartment nearby and you welcome them too, right? Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I would say. I mean, the Boulder, you need to understand the randomness of it. Those were people who just were shopping. This wasn't a group that was going to school. This wasn't a group of people who worked in the same building and went there and they had a regular and they were going to go back to school at some point. They're going to go back to work at some point. It's just a randomness of it. So you're going to get people who didn't know that they were impacted by it until 2 years down the line. It's like, oh my God, that is the supermarket that I went to, or that is the place, where I am, and all of a sudden, then they will, feel it. And that, they can come from anywhere. And that's, we had, in the theater, because like parents, it's tough for us to connect with the other parents because it wasn't them that lived here. Their kids had moved here, and their kids went to school here, and they're the ones who went. And so when we would go to try to reach out to other parents who were affected that day, like we were, well, they don't live here. They live, in other parts of the country. So I think the randomness is going to be something, and people can come from and could show up at any time, and that's how they're going to react.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for being here today. When we talk about it takes a village, it is taking all of us contributing and partnering with you to serve your impacted population and what that looks like. For us, and I hope I can share this, we don't have a STEM impacted person on the panel, but 2 of those members are on my team, and they say, just to kind of answer your question, is their healing journey has been stunted because on their 1-year mark, the pandemic hit. And then 2 years out, we've been in survival mode, trying to get through a pandemic. I've heard a lot from our parents that attend a lot of our activities, our book clubs and yoga. They're just starting now their healing journey. It's just beginning. And so it is important for these resiliency centers to stay open indefinitely and serve the greater population of people who have been impacted by such gun violence. And that is our team's like big picture effort, is to keep funding going so the center can stay open and continue to serve our people in our community. So thank you for asking that question. Thank you for being here. Our beloved Miss Christian.
Hi, yeah, I would like to also express my thanks to all of you for being here. I was at STEM on May 7th, and I was in the room next door, and I really especially want to thank Frank and Paula, because in those early days, I didn't see a way out, and I didn't see how I was going to get through any of this. And like Michelle, I was entertaining very frightening thoughts. And to hear from you guys that there was this other side was so powerful for me. And I think one of the things I wanted to ask, because you're both educators and you're in this system, and I'm teaching now still, but at a different school, with kids who, thank God, have not dealt with any of this. But when your triggers come up and you're still teaching and you're still responsible for kids, and the kids don't understand why you just burst into tears in the middle of the classroom, how do you handle that with them? I mean, one of the things I've tried to do is at an age-appropriate level just say, this reminds me of something very upsetting or very sad. But if you have any guidance, because I'm sure that like after the students at Columbine graduated, there were students coming in years later who didn't know, I mean, they knew about the event, but they didn't know what that's like. And like at STEM, my kids knew, we would all kind of gasp together a little bit if a door slammed, and we all kind of got it. And now I'm in an environment where there aren't folks who get it, and especially the students. I guess just any advice on navigating that as an educator would be super helpful.
I'm trying to remember, how old are the kids that you have now?
I'm at a middle school,
Okay,
so 6th through 8th grade.
Okay, good. So I was just really upfront with my students when I needed to be. So, for example, as I mentioned, every lockdown drill we had was in the classroom that I was in. Now at Columbine, we were always told about lockdown drills ahead of time because they were triggering for people. And so the surprise thing that they do at other schools, you just cannot do at Columbine. You still can't do that at Columbine. So I would just tell the kids beforehand, you need to know. I was in this room. This is a very difficult thing for me, and I need you to be perfect. And I taught at-risk students. Can you tell them a little straightforward? I taught at-risk students who were often in my class for behavior problems. And I just told them, this is extremely difficult. And the thing is, when you have a lot of kids with behavior problems, what you also have is a classroom full of kids who have experienced trauma. Wasn't your trauma, it's theirs, but they understand trauma. And when I told them I need you to be perfect, let me tell you, they were. And I had 0 behavior issues, whereas teachers who hadn't been through the shooting, who had kids, were, oh my God, trying to keep them quiet that long, trying to keep them seated that long is just impossible. And my kids were as good as gold because I was so straight up with them. And if there were times that I was really, if we learned of another shooting during the school day, and so I was a bit unraveled the rest of the day, I would just tell them straight up. And the kids appreciated that honesty. And I didn't put that on them. It's like, like let me just tell you my whole story. Let me tell you how I'm feeling. It was just, you need to understand, I struggle with this. And even if I got teary, I would just tell them, like, you need to understand, I'm not made of sugar. These tears are not going to dissolve me, but they are part of it. And I think that, like Frank said, when you model for kids that it's okay to feel what you're feeling, that you don't have to come completely unglued. You can express some emotion and still be able to gather yourself back up and be resilient. I think those are really valuable things for kids to get. I think you'll also discover that students who have experienced trauma may feel like they can come to you when they're feeling triggered. And it doesn't matter that you don't have the same trauma. It's, oh my God, I have a teacher who understands this. And I can come and I can say, you know how that one day you were like this? That's how I am today because of this. And again, it's one of those weird gifts that this thing gives you. And so I would say be honest with those kiddos.
And I think something that's important, I know when I meet with other administrators, a lot of times they don't want to talk to new coming faculty members in it, and that's a disservice. Because if we hired 23 new faculty members after, I met with all of them to talk about the events, because when kids are there and they start asking and you don't have the background, it suffers. And so when you go to other schools, I think you need to tell your people what you were involved in. There could be certain things that traumatize. And I struggle, I guess, with administration that said, it really never happened, you weren't here, don't worry about it, because you're part of that school. And those STEM kids, for new staff members coming in, they need to know exactly what's going on, because the event did happen. And that's where that counseling, and I talked about the class I really worried about was the class of 99, but the other one that I worried about was the class of 2003, because when they came in, they were in a no-win situation. If they were crying, the other student said, why are you crying? You weren't here. If they were laughing, they'd say, why are you showing disrespect? And so we had to talk about those kids also, because they were kind of on an island by themselves, because you had 3 classes that had been there for the shooting, and you had the one that just came in along with new staff members, but you need to educate them also, because they're part of that community.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions from the live stream, so we're going to go ahead and take these questions to the panel. I'm going to kind of two-part this because they work together. So have you been able to understand some of your reasons behind your triggers? And has knowing the reason for them helped when they happen? And then the second part of that is, how do you communicate to others what your triggers are, and how can you approach sharing this personal component with yourself and others? Open.
I think the one way I've been able to identify triggers and be able to identify and change behavior is I can tell now when I'm going into flight mode, and it will be anything from an argument with my partner or something that went wrong at work that day, and I'll be like, okay, I need to quit, or I need to leave this relationship, or I need to move out of this state, whatever the case may be. And then I have to be like, nope, this is a flight response. This has nothing to do with your partner. It has nothing to do with your job. All of that is completely fine. You're experiencing flight response. So I don't think I would have ever been able to identify that without a lot of therapy and a lot of talking with other survivors. And now I have to sit through it. Like, I still feel it. It doesn't mean that I don't feel the flight response, but I have to really sit with it and be like, okay, what's really going on and what is this trigger? So I think that's really how I've been able to identify.
I think one of the things is, if you're prepared, we all talked about the anniversary coming up, you prepare yourself for it. It's the unexpected things. Right now, if there were a balloon popping or something, you'd see a bunch of people probably diving on the floor. And here's a prime example. We go back to Chatfield, and the parents decide to put up an archway of balloons to welcome back the kids. Balloons started popping, kids start diving on the ground. It's the unexpected things that you're never ready for. The other stuff, as you point out, you have counseling, you prepare yourself for. It's the unexpected things that kind of trigger the emotions.
Yes, so to kind of piggyback off that, Frank, what you said, just being at another school where you might have impacted staff and students. There's a question, how have you been able to work to go back to school after a school shooting happened to be a support to their teachers and students? I think that could be you, Frank, or Paula.
Just to clarify the question, are you asking how we went back to our own schools or how we went to schools to help, to other schools to help people?
This says other schools, so it's coming from the chat. I apologize, I can't clarify
Yeah.
it live right now. But yes, I think other schools.
Okay. So when I've gone to other schools, what I remember most acutely, immediately after, was the desperate need to talk to somebody who had been through it. And it was because I wanted somebody who had been through it to be normal for me and show me that you could survive it. Because, you know, especially right after, it just didn't feel survivable. And so I go to other schools to give to them what I didn't have. I can go to them and say, you get okay after a while. And to acknowledge all the crappy stuff that goes on before that. Because it's a weird, comforting thing. Like, oh, okay, it's normal. This doesn't feel normal. It feels really dreadful, but apparently it's normal. And apparently you get through this part as well. So I think, you know, having that validation of somebody saying, yes, of course you feel this way, that's important. And it can be, you do kind of have to get into a headspace to not get yourself re-traumatized, to separate yourself out from what they're going through, but then to also be real. That's what I hear the most from folks from Sandy Hook and Marjorie Stoneman and places like that, is we really appreciate the fact that you were so real with us about what this process is like. And then I spend a lot of time giving them Q&A so that they can ask the questions that they need to ask. But the question I hear over and over and over is, pick a symptom, is this normal? And, you know, pick the symptom, yes it is.
And I think the other important thing, just like when I've been working with STEM, this isn't going to be a one-day conversation. What you're feeling now is going to be different than what you're feeling a year from now, 3 years from now, and we're always going to be there. And that's the important thing, because right now you're overwhelmed with everything happening, and you start talking, they're not going to remember. Let's talk about how we're going to get through the first 3 months, a year from now, and from that. But it's a long journey, and we're going to be there every step of the way.
Yeah, absolutely, and that does kind of navigate us into this other question. So we've talked a lot about how important community is and your support systems, especially along this journey to recovery. What did others do in your support group that was particularly helpful with your support of recovery?
Well, I mean, they just listened. I mean, I've been, you know, with the activism that I've been a part of, in some of the, which would be the saddest rooms you can imagine. I'm sitting in rooms with survivors of you know, a mass shooting like I had been involved in, random you know, gun violence in urban neighborhoods. You know, somebody's son or daughter had been killed by a neighbor kid who found a gun and you know, accidentally, the accidental type of ones, suicides, and you can, I mean, that is some of the most understanding people that, you know, I could be around, because you didn't have to pretend. You didn't have to be stronger than the person next to you. You didn't have to, you know, be stronger than the person who's asking you the question or they're having the conversation with you. You can say something, and without them nodding their head, they all know. They know what, you know, and you can say, you know, I remember this, and yeah, they've been there, or they're getting ready to be there, and all of that. And so those are, I don't know how that will sound to you, but those are things that you can kind of look forward to, is to go to that really safe area with the people who understand, because that is some of the most frustrating things. As much as you try to talk to somebody and explain to them, and this is what's going on, and this is why this is happening, next week they're going to come at you with the same type of thing, and it's like, you just don't, you didn't hear me before, you don't understand, and then, you try not to draw back. But if you get with that group of people, it's like, we all get it, and we can all be ourselves for whatever period of time that is, and you can kind of get a recharge, so that then you can go back and try to explain yourself and let somebody and they have good intentions. I know you want to understand, and hear us when we tell you that it's okay that you don't understand, because what we're doing is to make it so that you don't have to understand, so that you don't end up in a situation and live a life that we are living. And that's what our hope, I know that's what my hope is when I explain this to somebody, is that, I'm doing the best I can, but I'm going to tell you about this, but I hope to God you don't ever have to deal with this, because this sucks. This really does. And I had no idea. You thought, you've lost parents. I thought I understood what it was like, because, I went to my grandmother's funeral. I thought I knew how that was. It's nothing like going to your son's funeral and having to talk to all of those people and have them looking at you. And I remember, Tara, my wife and I, it was 2 days, and I remember walking into the bedroom, and we closed the door, and her and I said, they're coming, they're all going to be coming, and they're going to be looking, and we can do and say whatever we want to in here to one another, but we've got to be together when we go out, because they're going to try to figure out what it is they're supposed to do. And I don't know where that came for life. I don't know where that came from, but that was an agreement that the two of us had, and we worked on that together, and that's helped us get through all of this time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone on the stream that shared their questions. I know we probably didn't get to everyone's questions, so I apologize. I'm happy to take them directly offline and share them with someone on the panel. I know they'd be happy to answer your questions. I just appreciate you speaking. All of you sharing, everything that you've shared tonight has made an impact. To kind of echo what you have each said in a different variant, in a different way, is our community, we've been so honored and thankful of our advisory committee. Ms. Christian sits on our committee, Simi has sat on it, JJ doing the audio and live stream behind the scenes. She also sits on our board, and they share with us what it is that they need, what they're seeing, and they expressed to us that they needed, this was their next thing that they needed to start their healing journey, was to hear from you what it looks like in the different stages of life of recovery over time, because they're headed that direction now. And so I just really appreciate you for sharing. I honor you. Thank you so much. We spoke a lot about healing tonight. We talked a lot about counseling and how important this has been and pivotal in their journey. Mindfulness, yoga. These are things that we offer at the Center for Strength for free. We are grant funded by the government at this time, and so we are doing our best to make a big impact in
our community's journey towards healing through those different activities. It could be maybe you're ready to join a book club. We're hosting 2 different book clubs. Maybe you want to start by just understanding what trauma looks like in your body physically and hear from other people. So please visit our table to learn more about who we are. Rebels Project, who is our community advocates of all impacted members of gun violence. We are so thankful that they're here today. Missy, thank you so much for being here. And All Health's program for Colorado Spirit is here as well. Also, they offer free counseling services, so please take a moment to stop by those booths and check them out if you haven't. Otherwise, we just thank you so much for being here. We love you. Thank you for being here tonight, and we hope you guys have a safe and good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Well done. Woo!
Yeah, there's lots of programs. They like I said, they have that whole interim thing and behavioral. Whole big thing.
Because I do
Lots
feel
of
like it's
grants
such,
there. There's lots of things that they're trying to get together. So if you guys need any of that, you need any help with any of the